Hello everybody, my name's Wolf, and through this series of videos I'm going to explain to you the crazy, over-the-top world that nerds like me love so much, that is Warhammer 40,000. So get comfy, strap in, and prepare for a Noob-Splaining session. The Adeptus Custodes is the formal name for Emperor Chrysa's custodians, the pinnacle of genetic enhancement in the 40k universe. Anyone who has watched my previous videos will know full well I don't think they should have ever been released as a faction, and the fact that they were I feel was just a blatant cash grab. But here they are as a playable faction, so let's have a look at the basics on them. The Custodes are commonly considered the Emperor's elite bodyguards, which they are, but they are also so much more. Emperor Chris first created the Custodes back when Terra was still fractured and controlled by various different ruling warlords. Meant to be the elite warriors, they served alongside the Thunder Warriors, who were the Space Marine prototypes. He did also enhance every Custodes' intelligence to genius levels. Each Custodian is not only a master of every kind of warfare, but also a master of art and a scholar of every subject. If Wikipedia had a T-800 combat chassis as a body, it still wouldn't be as knowledgeable or as dangerous as the Custodes. You see, the Emperor didn't just create them as elite warriors. He needed to surround himself with people he could talk to as close to his level as possible, and at the time the only other person anywhere near his level was his best friend and main confidant, Malcador the Sigillite. Malcador was, however, just a man, and Emperor Chris knew he was going to be around a lot longer than Mal, so the main purpose of the Custodes was not only as elite trusted warriors, but also as friends he could engage in conversation with. At least that was the original plan. Everything I've read though still depicts Emperor Chris as somewhat aloof and still treats everyone as a lesser being to himself, which technically they are. But even though he is trying to ensure humanity is the only intelligent species in the galaxy, Emperor Chris is somewhat complex. Anyway, the Custodes, like I said, are the pinnacle of Emperor Chrysa's genetic enhancement, and the Primarchs being the pinnacle of genetic engineering, with both Custodes and Primarchs being functionally immortal. The Custodes have a fun naming system too. After they are given their first Custodes name, it's inscribed on the collar of their armour, which just makes me think of the same way a police officer has their name and badge number on their uniform. Anyway, as they progress throughout their very long lives performing heroic, outstanding deeds, like being the first to get to the bathroom in the morning and using up all the hot water, they will then earn an additional name, in this case probably something like Bastardus or Twaticus. These additional names are then inscribed on the inside of their armour so it is only known to the fellow Custodes. There's a reason for this, as names have power in the 40k universe to those with psychic abilities. Anyway, some of the Custodes have used up that much hot water or drank the last cold beer from the fridge and not refilled it, that they have earned that many extra names there is no space left inside their armour, and so it is started to be inscribed on the outside of their armour as well. Some Custodes have earned over 200 names in their long and illustrious careers. They have a very strict regime too, so if one Custodian is injured or just starts getting a bit too old and loses even 1% of their fighting prowess, they're basically fired, given some weapons and sent into the galaxy to find and kill the enemies of mankind, a bit like what they do with retiring judges in the Judge Dredd universe. They also have something called the Blood Games, which is where a Custodes is selected at random, stripped of all their equipment, and then dumped somewhere on Terra, sometimes off planet. What they have to do then is break into Emperor Chrysa's palace and attempt to kill him. Obviously none have ever achieved this, but when they debrief the Custodian on what they did, they use it to increase security in the palace, in theory making it harder to get into the palace undetected each time a new blood game starts. There was also a blip in the lore when some Eldar Harlequins, just a handful, managed to break into the Emperor's palace and murdered a whole bunch of Custodians without even breaking a sweat. But with how OP Eldar are at the moment and people calling for them to get nerfed, it's looking less like a blip and more like a reality. A lot of people look at the Custodes and think they are just super special Space Marines, which is an easy mistake to make, but in reality they are as far beyond a Space Marine as a Space Marine is beyond a normal human. This is reflected in their creation time, as it takes not only twice as long to create a Custodes as it does a Space Marine, it uses up at least 10 times the resources, and you can bet your ass that it's all the good rare resources too. They are referred to as the 10,000, as there was originally only 10,000 of them, and seen as replacing them is not a quick process. Those numbers have been reduced over the years. However, in the lore, very few have ever actually died. In fact, in the lore, there are even more over the top than Space Marines. Space Marines are depicted as coherent squads fighting together. Custodians are literal one-man armies that can fight in cohesion, enhancing each other's prowess if need be, or just solo the entire enemy while their mates watch on drinking coffee. Their armour and equipment is on another level also. Space Marine equipment may be top notch, but even that looks like a Ford compared to the Ferrari/Rolls-Royce level of gear that the Custodes have. The Custodes are that powerful that when they do go to war, the Imperium records it as a victory before they have even finished putting on their ass-kicking boots, let alone arrived at the battlefield. So no pressure there. Right lads, we've already recorded it as a 4-0 win, so make sure you come in with the trophy. In reality, however, due to their rareness and difficulty in replacing them, they are rarely seen on the battlefield. This is what I call the Yamato effect. You see, the Yamato and her sister ship was that expensive to make in resources and such a source of national pride. Both ships spent most of their time in harbour as they just cost too much in resources to risk losing them in battle. The Custodes are the same. Although being super powerful and supposedly the best warriors in the galaxy apart from the Primarchs, they are not totally invincible and as such are only deployed to battle very rarely. This is the reason I feel they should not be a playable faction, and the fact that they were is a blatant cash grab. So how does super powerful translate to the tabletop? Well, not great in my opinion. They are very tough and powerful and expensive points wise, but they have a very limited selection of units. Due to the points cost though, they are money wise one of the cheaper armies to collect, as you don't need very many units. And yes, they are tough with a chance to ignore even mortal wounds, but are not totally unkillable. And although I haven't played 40k in a while, I have always kept up with the news, and I don't ever remember a time when people were complaining that the Custodes are too OP and need to be nerfed, unlike the Eldar right now who are just dominating everything. So if you want a small yet even more flexible army than Space Marines, you can't go wrong with the Custodes. And they get to deploy Land Raiders, which is always a plus in my book, because Land Raiders are fucking cool. But the main army consists of Custodes in power armour with spears or swords and shields, even tougher Custodes in power armour with spears or axes, and finally Custodes in Terminator armour with spears or axes. That's pretty much your entire choice. Don't worry though, all the melee weapons have guns built in, but from a collecting and painting point of view, you will soon get bored of painting the same damn models in gold. And therein lies another problem with them. With every other faction you can paint them in any damn colours you want, but Custodes that are not in gold, well, they're not really Custodes. I suppose you could make the argument you won't have as many to paint, but that again leads to another problem, this time on the tabletop. With less units on the table, each squad becomes a fucking bullet magnet, and I can see a large chunk of them being destroyed by the end of turn 2, and the rest of the battle will be your opponent just mopping up. If you haven't been virtually wiped by the end of turn 2, then you can cause absolute devastation among enemy units in melee, because although they can all shoot, their strength is really in slicing and dicing the enemy up. I know the whole point of 40k using dice is to add an element of randomness or luck to it, but when you're relying on luck to get you through the first 2 turns, while you close the gap with your enemy to initiate melee, that's not much of a tactic to me. I would never discourage anyone from collecting any type of army in 40k. Myself, I would like to grab a squad or 2 in the future just to paint up and add to my collection, but as for an actual tabletop army, I fucking hate the idea of them almost as much as I fucking despise the thought of Grey Knights being a playable faction as well. And yet I want some Grey Knight models too. Over the years in the lore since the Horus Heresy, Custodes have been depicted as becoming more and more detached from humanity, like some overzealous civil servant Jobsworth. So just like any Jobsworth, they should stay in the palace and wait until it's their turn to be murdered by a few dozen OP Eldar on a rampage. And there we have it. That brings us to the end of this video. If you laughed or learnt anything, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and if you are already subscribed, then don't forget to share this video with somebody who could do with some noob-splaining in their life. Also, leave a comment on your favourite part. I do try and interact with every comment. But if you made it this far, thank you, and I'll see you next time.